My son hadn't spoken to me in 9 months. 9 whole months of silence. But the moment the doctors told him I had a brain tumor, he showed up at my door with a moving truck and a power of attorney form. That was Tuesday. By Friday, my house was half empty, and I found out he'd already put it on the market. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching every move he made, and the woman who helped me see the truth wasn't family at all. She was the hospice nurse who'd cared for my late husband, and she remembered everything. Before we begin, if stories about standing your ground and knowing your worth speak to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Gem Revenge. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments. It means more than you know. And just so we're clear, some details in this story have been changed for privacy and narrative purposes. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental. The emotions, though those are very real. It started with a headache that wouldn't quit, 3 weeks of pressure behind my left eye, the kind that made the morning light feel like needles. I'm not the type to run to the doctor over every ache. At 68, you learn to live with a certain amount of discomfort. Your knees pop, your back complains, you adjust and keep moving. But this was different. I was standing in the kitchen of the house my husband Raymond and I had bought in 1986, the house where we'd raised our son Derek, where Raymond had built the back deck with his own hands, where I'd planted the garden that still bloomed every spring. I was pouring coffee when the room tilted sideways. Not a little wobble. The whole world shifted like someone had picked up the house and set it down crooked. I grabbed the counter, spilled coffee across the tile, and stood there breathing hard until the walls stopped moving. That afternoon, I called Dr. Pressler. He'd been my physician for 20 years. Kind man, thorough. He ran tests, did imaging, referred me to a specialist at University Medical Center downtown. 2 weeks of appointments, scans, and waiting rooms later, Dr. Anand sat across from me in his office with a file open on his desk and a look on his face I recognized. I'd seen that look before on the oncologist who told us about Raymond's pancreatic cancer 4 years ago. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "we found a meningioma, a brain tumor." The words landed somewhere outside of me, like he was talking about a stranger. I heard him explain benign, most likely, slow growing, operable, but the surgery carried risks given its location. We needed to schedule it soon, within the next 6 weeks. The pressure on the surrounding tissue was causing my symptoms, and it would only get worse. I nodded through the explanation, asked the right questions, took the pamphlets, drove home in silence. That night, I sat in Raymond's recliner, the brown leather one he'd refused to replace even when the armrests cracked. I held my phone and stared at Derek's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button for a long time. 9 months. That's how long it had been since we'd spoken. The last conversation, if you could call it that, had been an argument at Thanksgiving. He'd brought his wife Vanessa and my grandson Caleb, who was 9. The visit lasted 4 hours. Vanessa complained about the food, the temperature of the house, the drive. Derek sat on his phone the whole time. When I asked about Caleb's school, Vanessa answered for him with one-word responses. After dinner, Derek pulled me aside. "Mom, we need to talk about this house." "What about it?" "It's too big for one person. You're rattling around in here alone. Have you thought about downsizing?" I told him I was fine. This was my home. Raymond and I had paid it off 15 years ago. I had no mortgage, low taxes, good neighbors. Why would I leave? He got irritated. "You're being stubborn. This place is worth at least $400,000 in this market. You could sell, move into something smaller, and have cash in the bank." "Cash for whom?" I'd asked quietly. He didn't answer. Vanessa called from the living room that they needed to beat traffic. They left 20 minutes later. Caleb hugged me at the door, long and tight, like he didn't want to go. That hug stayed with me for weeks. After that, silence. No calls on Christmas. No birthday card in February. I sent Caleb a present for his 10th birthday in March, a set of books about space, because he'd told me he wanted to be an astronaut. I never heard if he received them. Now, I was sitting in Raymond's chair with a brain tumor and a son who hadn't called in 9 months. I didn't dial the number. I put the phone down, went to bed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I called someone else instead, Patricia Navarro. Pat had been the hospice nurse assigned to Raymond during his final months. She wasn't supposed to become family, but grief has a way of bonding people that nothing else can. Pat had sat with me through Raymond's worst nights, held my hand when he stopped recognizing my face, stayed 2 hours past her shift, the evening he passed, because she said she wasn't leaving me alone in that house with silence. After Raymond died, Pat checked on me. Weekly calls at first, then monthly, but never missed. She brought soup when I had the flu, helped me sort through Raymond's clothes when I was finally ready. 11 months later. She'd become the person I called when the loneliness got too heavy, and she always answered. Pat listened to the diagnosis without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When is the surgery?" 6 weeks. Maybe sooner. "I'm coming over tonight. We'll make a plan." She arrived at 6 with takeout from the Thai place Raymond and I used to love, and we sat at the kitchen table mapping out the next month. Appointments, pre-op tests. Who would drive me? Who would stay with me after? Pat volunteered for all of it before I could ask. "What about Derek?" she asked carefully. "What about him? Does he know?" "No." "Are you going to tell him?" "I don't know." Pat didn't push. She never did, but her eyes said everything. I decided to tell him. Not because I expected him to care, but because if something went wrong in surgery, I didn't want him to hear it from a stranger. I called the next morning. He answered on the 4th ring, distracted. "Mom." "Hey, what's up?" I kept it brief. "Brain tumor. Surgery scheduled. Wanted you to know." The silence on his end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then his voice came back. Different. Sharper. Focused in a way I hadn't heard in years. "A brain tumor? When? How bad? What kind?" I answered his questions. He asked more. Suddenly he was engaged, present, interested in my life for the first time in 9 months. But something about his tone felt off. Not worried exactly. More like calculating. "I need to come see you," he said. "Tomorrow." "You don't have to." "I'm coming, Mom. This is serious. You shouldn't be handling this alone." He arrived Tuesday morning in a rented moving truck. I was watering the garden when I heard the diesel engine rumble down my quiet street. I stood up, shears in hand, and watched a 26-foot truck park in front of my house. Derek climbed out of the cab. Vanessa stepped out of their SUV behind it. "What is this?" I asked. Derek walked up the driveway with a folder under his arm, hugged me with one arm brief, mechanical. "Mom, we need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" "You have a brain tumor. You're living alone in a 4-bedroom house. You can't stay here by yourself going into major surgery." "I've arranged." He kept talking like I hadn't spoken. "We've looked into a place for you. Maplewood Gardens. It's a senior living community 20 minutes from us. Nice place, really nice. Activities, meals, medical staff on site. You'd love it." Vanessa handed me a glossy brochure. The cover showed silver-haired people playing cards in a sunlit room. Everyone smiling, everyone managed. I looked at the brochure, looked at the truck, looked at my son. "Derek," I said slowly, "I haven't agreed to anything." "Mom, be reasonable. You could collapse. You could have a seizure. What if something happens and no one's here?" "I have neighbors. I have Pat. I have the church. Pat's a nurse, not family. And your neighbors are strangers. Betty next door has lived there for 22 years. He waved his hand. "The point is, we need to get you somewhere safe, and we need to deal with this house." "Deal with it." The market is hot right now. We could list it this week and have offers by the weekend. That money could cover Maplewood for years. And whatever's left goes into savings. Whose savings? He didn't blink. A family trust. For Caleb's future. For your care costs. We'd manage it together. Together meaning you and Vanessa would control it. "Mom, don't make this into something it's not. We're trying to help." I looked at the truck again. "You brought a moving truck before asking me." Vanessa stepped in, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "We just want to get ahead of it, Mom. You know, in case things move fast with the surgery. We figured we could start packing the non-essentials today. Save you the stress." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not pain, clarity. I told them I needed to think about it. Derek was frustrated but agreed to give me a day. They left the truck parked in front of my house overnight like a threat. That evening, Pat came over. I told her everything. The truck, the brochure, the family trust. Her face hardened in a way I'd never seen. "Evelyn," she said, "I need to tell you something." She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and showed me a message dated 3 days earlier. It was from Vanessa, sent to Maplewood Gardens. Pat had contacts there. She'd worked with their medical team on hospice cases, and a colleague had forwarded it to her thinking she should know. The email was an inquiry about admitting me. It listed my address, my age, my medical history details only family would know. It described me as a 68-year-old widow experiencing cognitive decline, memory loss, and confusion. It asked about availability, costs, and the part that made my blood go cold, the process for obtaining medical guardianship over a parent deemed unable to make her own decisions. The email was sent 2 days after I told Derek about the tumor. 2 days. Before he'd even visited. Before he'd seen me, talked to me, assessed anything. They weren't reacting to a crisis. They'd been waiting for one. I read the email 3 times. My hands didn't shake. I expected them to, but they were steady. Something inside me had shifted, like a bone setting after a break. It hurt, but it was right. The next morning I called my lawyer, Frances Okoro. She'd handled Raymond's estate, knew my affairs inside out. I told her what I'd found. Frances didn't seem surprised. "I see this more often than you'd think," she said. "Adult children, financial pressure, aging parent with assets. The tumor gives them the angle they need. What do I do?" "We protect everything." Today. Over the next 48 hours, Frances and I dismantled every avenue my son could use to take control of my life. We updated my will. We established a trust for Caleb, $200,000 for education, managed by Frances as trustee, completely inaccessible to Derek or Vanessa until Caleb turned 18. We assigned Pat as my medical power of attorney and healthcare proxy. We designated Frances as executor of my estate. We documented my mental competency with a full evaluation from Dr. Pressler, witnessed and notarized. I also called Betty next door, and Janet from church, and my friend Doris from the reading group. I asked each of them the same question. "Has my son or his wife contacted you recently, asking about my health or mental state?" Every single one said yes. Betty said Vanessa had called, asking if I'd been confused or forgetful lately. Janet said Derek had emailed the church office requesting information about senior support services for me. Doris said Vanessa had called her twice, once asking about memory issues and once asking whether I'd mentioned anything about my finances. They were building a case. The same playbook, different players. Call the people around me. Plant seeds of doubt. Establish a paper trail of decline that didn't exist. I wrote down every conversation, every date, every detail. Frances added them to the file. "Thursday," Derek called. "Have you thought about Maplewood?" I told him we should discuss it in person. Friday, at Frances's office. A family meeting to go over everything properly. He agreed immediately. Too eagerly. Friday morning, I put on the blue dress Raymond had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was thinner than it used to be. The lines around my eyes were deeper, but my gaze was steady and clear. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd been underestimated for the last time. Pat drove me to the office. We arrived early. Frances had the conference room prepared, documents arranged, copies labeled, everything precise. I sat at the head of the table. Pat sat beside me. Frances took her position at the far end. Derek and Vanessa arrived at 10 sharp, both dressed like they were closing a real estate deal, which, I suppose, they thought they were. Derek paused when he saw Pat. "Why is she here?" "Because I asked her to be," I said. "Sit down." They sat. Vanessa arranged her face into concern. Derek opened his folder. I could see real estate listings printed out. My house, already photographed and priced. He'd had an agent come by, without my permission. "So," Derek began, leaning forward. "I've talked to a few agents, and the house could list at $425, maybe $450 with some staging. If we move fast." "Derek," I said, "put that away." He blinked. "Mom, we talked about this." "No." "You talked. I listened. Now it's my turn." The room went very still. "I know about the email to Maplewood Gardens." Vanessa's face went white. "I know it described me as cognitively declining, confused, and in need of guardianship. 2 days after I told you about the tumor, before you'd even seen me." Derek started to speak. "I wasn't finished. I know you called Betty, asking if I was forgetful. I know you emailed the church asking about senior services. I know Vanessa called Doris twice asking about my memory and my finances. Mom, we were worried. You were building a case." I pulled out the printed email, slid it across the table. Vanessa wouldn't look at it. Derek stared at it, jaw tight. "You wanted me declared incompetent so you could take my house, sell it, and control the money. The tumor was just the excuse you needed." "That's not," Vanessa began. Frances spoke for the first time. "I've documented everything. Mrs. Whitfield has undergone a full cognitive evaluation. She passed with excellent scores. Her physician has provided a written statement of mental competency, notarized and witnessed." She slid a copy across the table. "Any attempt to pursue guardianship," Frances continued, her voice calm as a blade, "will be met with this documentation, along with records of your inquiries to Mrs. Whitfield's friends, neighbors, and church community. A pattern of behavior that any judge would recognize as financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Derek's face changed. The confidence drained out of it like water from a cracked glass. Vanessa gripped the arm of her chair. "Now," I said, "let me tell you what's going to happen." Frances opened the file. "My will has been revised. My house is mine. It will not be sold. When I pass, it goes into a trust. The proceeds will be divided as follows." She began reading. $200,000 to the Caleb Whitfield Education Trust, managed by Frances as sole trustee. Derek and Vanessa would have no access, no oversight, no authority over the funds until Caleb reached 18. Derek leaned forward. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And I have," Frances continued. $75,000 to Patricia Navarro, in recognition of extraordinary care and friendship. Pat made a small sound beside me. I squeezed her hand. $50,000 to Grace Baptist Church General Fund. $50,000 to the Raymond Whitfield Memorial Scholarship at Lincoln High School. $25,000 to the County Hospice Program. Frances closed the folder. The remainder of the estate is designated for Mrs. Whitfield's personal care and living expenses for the duration of her life. The silence in that room was absolute. Vanessa broke first. Her voice came out high and thin. "So we get nothing? After everything we've done?" "Everything you've done," I repeated. "Tell me, Vanessa, what exactly have you done? You visited 4 hours at Thanksgiving and complained the entire time. You haven't called since November. You sent an email trying to have me institutionalized. You contacted my friends to build a case that I was losing my mind. And you brought a moving truck to my house before I'd agreed to anything." Derek's eyes were red. "Mom, I'm your son." "Yes, you are. And for 9 months, that meant nothing to you. I didn't hear from you at Christmas. You didn't call on my birthday. You didn't ask how I was doing, if I was lonely, if I needed anything. But the moment you heard brain tumor, you showed up with a truck and a plan to sell my home." I paused. "Your father would be heartbroken." That landed. I saw it hit him. Derek looked away, jaw working. "You can't do this," Vanessa said to Frances. "We'll fight it." Frances didn't flinch. "You're welcome to try. You'll need to prove undue influence or mental incapacity. Dr. Pressler's evaluation was conducted independently. The witnesses are credible, the documentation is thorough, and Mrs. Whitfield's attorney, that's me, will ensure this will stands exactly as written. Any challenge will be expensive, public, and unsuccessful." Derek stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. He looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. Hurt, maybe, or shame, maybe both. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said. "For the first time in years," I said, "I do." They left. The door closed hard behind them, not quite a slam, but close. The room breathed. Pat was crying beside me, quiet tears, the kind that come from relief, Evelyn, I never expected. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Francis gathered the papers. You did the right thing, Evelyn. This is airtight. I sat there for a while after they left. I thought I'd feel devastated, or triumphant, or hollow. I felt none of those things. I felt clear, like stepping out of a fog I hadn't realized I'd been walking through for years. The surgery was 3 weeks later. Pat drove me to the hospital at 5 in the morning. Betty came by the night before with a casserole and a prayer card. Janet from church organized a phone tree so someone would be checking in every day. Doris brought flowers the morning of, left them on my porch with a note that said, "You are stronger than you know." Derek didn't call. The surgery took 7 hours. When I woke up in recovery, the first face I saw was Pat's. She looked exhausted, red-eyed, her hair pulled back, still in the same clothes from that morning. She'd been there the entire time. "How do you feel?" she whispered. "Alive," I said. And I meant it in every possible way. Dr. Anand came by that evening. The tumor was benign, fully removed. He expected a complete recovery. I'd need physical therapy, follow-up scans, rest, but the prognosis was excellent. I spent 4 days in the hospital. Pat was there every single one. Betty visited twice. Janet brought the church group to pray with me in the chapel downstairs. Doris came with a bag of books and a blanket from home. Derek didn't visit, didn't call, didn't text. But something happened on day 3 that I wasn't expecting. I was dozing in the afternoon when I heard small footsteps in the hallway. Quick, uncertain, trying to be quiet. Then a small voice. "Grandma?" I opened my eyes. Caleb stood in the doorway, 10 years old, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands like it was made of glass. His eyes were wide. Behind him, half hidden in the corridor, was a woman I didn't recognize until I did. Derek's neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. She waved at me and mouthed, "He asked me to bring him." Caleb walked to my bed slowly, like he was afraid I might break. He set the paper on my blanket and unfolded it. A drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, one tall with gray hair, one small with a big smile. Below, in careful handwriting, "Get well soon, Grandma. I love you to the moon." I pulled him into a hug so tight I felt the stitches protest. I didn't care. "Mom said you were sick," he whispered, "but she said we weren't allowed to visit." I asked Mrs. Alvarez to bring me. "Please don't be mad." "I'm not mad, baby. I'm so happy you're here." We spent an hour together. He told me about school, about his new teacher, about the books I'd sent for his birthday. He'd read every one of them, twice. He wanted to know about the surgery. I told him the doctors fixed my head and now I was going to be just fine. When Mrs. Alvarez said they needed to go, Caleb hugged me again. "Can I come back?" "Anytime, sweetheart. Anytime." After he left, I put the drawing on the windowsill where I could see it from my bed. Pat saw it when she came back with dinner. "His neighbor brought him," I said. Derek didn't know. Pat looked at the drawing for a long time. "That boy loves you." "I know, and I won't let anyone keep him from me." Recovery took weeks. I was patient with my body, which was more than I'd been in years. Pat helped me with physical therapy exercises. I walked a little more each day down the hallway, around the block, eventually to the park, 2 streets over where Raymond and I used to walk our dog, Walter. Walter had been gone 6 years, but I still thought of him every time I passed those benches. The phone calls from Derek and Vanessa came in waves, first nothing for 2 weeks after the surgery, then a burst of contact all from Vanessa. "We should discuss the trust. There are modifications that would benefit everyone." I didn't respond. Caleb deserves access to those funds now, for private school. Francis sent a form letter. "The trust terms are final. You're going to regret alienating your only son." I put the phone down. 3 months passed. The follow-up scans were clean. The headache stopped. My energy returned, stronger than before the tumor, like my body was grateful for the second chance and wanted to prove it. I made changes. Joined a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd wanted to try since retirement but never did because I was too busy waiting for Derek to call. I signed up for the church's Meals on Wheels program, delivering food to homebound seniors. Some of them reminded me of what I could have become, alone, forgotten, dependent on the goodness of strangers. I was determined not to let that happen. Pat and I started a Tuesday tradition breakfast at the diner on 9th Street, the one with the bottomless coffee and the waitress who called everyone hun. We'd sit in the booth by the window and talk about everything and nothing. She told me about her cases, the families she worked with, the beautiful and terrible ways people face the end of life. I told her about my painting, my walks, the neighbor's new puppy that kept digging under my fence. One Tuesday, she said something I'll never forget. "You know what I noticed about you, Evelyn? You spent your whole marriage being someone's wife. Then you spent 4 years being someone's grieving widow. Then you spent 9 months being someone's abandoned mother. But right now, sitting here with that paint smudge on your sleeve and coffee on your chin, you're just you. And I think that might be the best version yet." I laughed so hard coffee came out of my nose. But she was right. Caleb has visited 4 more times since the hospital. Mrs. Alvarez brings him. We bake cookies. We read together. Last visit, he brought his science project a model of the solar system and asked me to help him paint Jupiter. We got orange acrylic on the kitchen floor and laughed until our stomachs hurt. I don't know if Derek knows about the visits. I don't ask. Caleb is 10 years old and smart enough to know that love shouldn't require permission. Last week, something unexpected happened. A letter in the mail. Derek's handwriting on the envelope. No return address. Inside, 1 page. Handwritten. "Mom, I don't know how to say this. I've been angry. At you, at myself, at everything. Vanessa and I are having problems. I think I've been having problems for a long time and I took it out on you because you were the easiest target. You always forgave me. I counted on that. I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I don't think I've earned it. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong, all of it. I'm sorry about Dad. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry about the truck and Maplewood and everything. I was weak and greedy and scared and I let Vanessa drive decisions I should have fought against. That's not an excuse. There is no excuse. I just wanted you to know. Derek." I read it 3 times. Then I put it in the drawer next to Raymond's watch and Philip's letters and Caleb's drawing. I haven't called him. I'm not ready. Maybe I will be, someday. Maybe I won't. But the letter sits there, and I know it exists. And for now, that's enough. I'm 68 years old. I survived a brain tumor. I lost my son, or maybe I lost the idea of who I wanted him to be. But I gained something I didn't expect. Myself. My house is still mine. My garden still blooms. The watercolors are getting better. Pat says I have a gift, which is generous, but I'll take it. Caleb is coming this Saturday to help me plant tomatoes. Betty is bringing lemonade. The church group meets Wednesday for our new book. Francis checks in monthly, more as a friend now than a lawyer. And there's a brochure on my kitchen table. Not for a senior living facility. For a painting retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico. 2 weeks in the desert, learning landscapes. I'm terrified. I'm going anyway. People say family is everything. I used to believe that without question. Now I believe something different. Family is who shows up. Family is who answers the phone. Family is who sits in the hospital waiting room for 7 hours and doesn't complain about the coffee. Family is a hospice nurse who became a best friend. Family is a 10-year-old boy who asked his neighbor to drive him to the hospital because his parents wouldn't. Family is not who shares your blood. Family is who shares your burden. My son brought a moving truck. My nurse brought takeout and a plan. My grandson brought a drawing, my neighbors brought casseroles, my church brought prayers, and I brought myself finally, completely back to life. If you're watching this, and you see yourself in my story, if someone in your life is trying to make you smaller so they can take what's yours, I want you to hear me. You are not too old to fight. You are not too tired to say no. You are not too kind to protect yourself. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's surrender. And to the sons and daughters watching, call your mother. Not when you need something. Not when there's money to discuss. Call her on a Tuesday for no reason at all. Ask her how she's doing and wait for the real answer, not the polite one. Because one day you'll dial that number and no one will pick up. And you'll understand, too late, what 47 missed calls feels like from the other side. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me who showed up for you when it mattered most. And if you haven't found your people yet, keep looking. They're out there. Sometimes they're already in your life, waiting for you to let them in. Some stories on this channel include fictionalized elements for educational and narrative purposes. If this kind of content speaks to you, subscribe to Gem Revenge for more stories about courage, boundaries, and second chances. And remember, the only approval you truly need is your own. Everything else is just noise.